The wind howled across the empty fields as John Harper stood at the edge of his farm, staring at the land that had once been his pride and joy. The soil beneath his boots, once rich and full of promise, had turned dry and lifeless. The crops barely grew anymore, and the debts kept piling up. Each day felt heavier than the last, like the weight of the world was pressing down on his shoulders. John had poured everything into this farm. It had been in his family for generations, passed down with stories of resilience and hard work. But times had changed. Droughts, rising costs, and unpredictable markets had turned farming into an uphill battle. He had tried everything: loans, selling equipment, even taking on odd jobs in town to make ends meet. But nothing was enough. The bank's final notice sat on the kitchen table, a cold reminder that time was running out. One evening, after another exhausting day of trying to fix a tractor that was beyond repair, John sat down with his laptop. His wife, Emily, had fallen asleep on the couch, worry etched across her face even in sleep. His young daughter, Sophie, clutched her stuffed rabbit, unaware of the storm her family was facing. John knew he had to do something, anything, to keep his family afloat. As he scrolled through news articles and social media, his eyes landed on a post about Elon Musk, a billionaire, a visionary, a man who had sent rockets to space and revolutionized electric cars, a man who had once spoken about never giving up, no matter how impossible things seemed. John had never written to anyone famous before. What were the chances Elon Musk would even read his message, let alone respond? But desperation has a way of pushing people beyond their comfort zones. With shaky hands, he started typing. He poured his heart out, not asking for money, but for advice, for hope. He shared the struggles of farmers like him, the ones who worked tirelessly yet felt forgotten. He spoke of his daughter's dreams, of his wife's quiet strength, of his fear that he was failing them. Then, without overthinking, he hit send. Days passed, then weeks. John carried on, waking before dawn, working until exhaustion, pretending he wasn't waiting for something, anything. He didn't tell Emily. He didn't want to seem foolish, but deep down, a small part of him held onto the possibility that maybe, just maybe, someone like Elon Musk would listen. Then, one evening, as John was rinsing the dirt from his hands, his phone buzzed. At first, he ignored it, assuming it was another bill reminder or some automated message. But then he saw the name. His breath caught in his throat. It was a reply from Elon Musk himself, and what he said, it would change everything. John's heart pounded as he stared at his phone screen, his rough, calloused fingers hovering over the glowing notification. He blinked, thinking maybe he was imagining it, but the name was real. Elon Musk, the man he had written to on a desperate whim, had actually responded. His hands shook as he tapped the message open. It was short, straight to the point, but it was real. John, I read your message. I want to help. Tell me more about your farm. For a moment, John just sat there, unable to process what was happening. A billionaire, a man with the world at his fingertips, had taken time to acknowledge him. A struggling farmer from a small town no one had ever heard of. It didn't feel real. He glanced over at Emily, who was still asleep on the couch, unaware that their lives might be on the brink of change. His daughter Sophie had curled up beside her, her little chest rising and falling with each peaceful breath. Taking a deep breath, John started typing. He told Elon everything: how his grandfather had built this farm from the ground up, how his father had expanded it, and how he had spent his entire life working the land. He explained the hardships, how the cost of farming had skyrocketed while profits had plummeted, how droughts had drained their fields, and how the bank was now threatening to take away everything his family had worked for. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He wasn't asking for charity. He just wanted to be heard. Hours passed, and John sat staring at the screen, waiting. He told himself not to get his hopes up, but the possibility was there. He barely slept that night, and when the morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, his phone buzzed again. This is a bigger problem than just your farm, John. Farmers like you are the backbone of the country, and I want to explore solutions. Can you get on a call? John's breath caught. A call? He had never spoken to anyone like Elon Musk before. He wasn't a businessman or an engineer. He was just a farmer. What could he possibly say that would matter? But then he thought about Emily, about Sophie, about the generations before him who had fought to keep this land alive. If there was even a sliver of hope, he had to take it. That evening, after finishing his chores, he sat in his truck, his phone pressed against his ear. The line clicked, and suddenly, a familiar voice filled the silence. "Hey, John, tell me everything." John hesitated for only a second before diving in. He spoke about how modern technology had left small farmers behind, how big corporations were swallowing family farms, how government aid rarely reached the people who needed it the most. He talked about the sheer exhaustion of working from sunrise to sunset, only to be buried deeper in debt. Elon listened. He asked questions, real questions, not the kind people asked just to be polite, but ones that showed he genuinely wanted to understand. And then, after a long pause, he said something that sent a chill down John's spine. "I think we can change this." John leaned forward, gripping the steering wheel. "What do you mean?" "What if I told you that farming could be revolutionized the same way we changed space travel or electric cars? What if technology could make farming profitable again? Lower costs, increase efficiency, and give power back to the farmers." John's mind raced. It sounded like a dream, too big, too impossible. But wasn't that what people had said about electric cars? About reusable rockets? About everything Elon Musk had ever done? Over the next few weeks, John's world turned upside down. He found himself on more calls, not just with Elon, but with experts, engineers, and scientists. People who were working on cutting-edge agricultural technology, automated farming, AI-driven soil analysis, water conservation techniques that could turn dry land fertile again. The biggest shock came when Elon asked if he could visit John's farm. John had never felt more nervous in his life. His farm wasn't a high-tech operation. It was old, worn down, barely holding together. But Elon Musk, one of the richest men in the world, wanted to see it with his own eyes. The day arrived, and John stood at the edge of his field, his heartbeat loud in his ears as a sleek black car pulled up his dusty driveway. When the door opened, out stepped Elon himself. No cameras, no big entourage, just him, dressed simply, his eyes scanning the land with curiosity and intent. "Show me everything," he said. John took him through the fields, pointing out the dead crops, the broken irrigation system, the outdated tractors that guzzled more fuel than they were worth. Elon asked question after question, jotting down notes on his phone, occasionally pausing to stare at the sky, as if working through a problem in his head. As the sun began to set, Elon turned to John, a serious look in his eyes. "I have an idea. It's going to be big, and I want you to be a part of it." John's breath hitched. He had no idea what was coming next, but he knew one thing for sure: his life, his farm, and maybe even the future of farming itself, was about to change forever. John could barely find his voice. Elon Musk, one of the most influential people in the world, had just said he had an idea, something big, and that he wanted John to be part of it. For a man who had spent most of his life knee-deep in dirt, struggling to keep his family's farm alive, it didn't seem real. But the way Elon looked at him, with that sharp, calculating intensity, John knew he wasn't joking. Over the next few days, things started moving at a speed John wasn't used to. Calls, emails, and plans started coming together like a puzzle being solved in real time. Elon wasn't just interested in John's farm. He was interested in something much bigger. He saw how outdated farming methods were holding small farmers back. He saw how technology could be the answer, just like it had been in the auto and space industries. Then came the real shock. Elon announced he was launching a new agricultural initiative, one that would bring sustainable technology directly to farmers who needed it the most. And he wanted John's farm to be the testing ground. John couldn't believe it. His struggling farm, the one he thought he was going to lose, was now at the center of a project that could change farming forever. Engineers arrived with cutting-edge equipment, self-sustaining irrigation systems, AI-driven soil analysis, and even solar-powered tractors that ran without fuel. It was like stepping into the future. At first, John was skeptical. He had spent his whole life doing things the old-fashioned way. Could machines really do what generations of farmers had done by hand? Could technology really save the land? But as the days passed, the changes became undeniable. The dry, cracked soil started to show signs of life again. The crops grew stronger, healthier, requiring less water. The automated systems allowed John to work smarter, not harder. For the first time in years, he wasn't waking up in a panic, wondering if his farm would survive another season. Word spread fast. Other struggling farmers started reaching out, asking if this technology could help them too. And just like that, John realized this wasn't just about him anymore. One evening, as he walked through his fields that were now thriving, he thought about the message he had sent that night when he had nothing left to lose. A simple letter to a man he never thought would answer. And yet, here he was. His farm was saved. His family's future was secure. And most importantly, he had hope again. John stood on his porch, watching Sophie chase fireflies in the yard, Emily laughing as she called her inside. He pulled out his phone and stared at the last message he had received from Elon. "This is just the beginning." John smiled. Maybe it was. Maybe farming was about to change forever. Maybe all it had taken was one desperate message, one person willing to listen, and a belief that no matter how impossible something seemed, there was always a way forward. And with that thought, John put his phone away, walked back inside, and finally, for the first time in years, allowed himself to breathe.